Thank you for joining us on another Sunday for our English program. I'm your host, Alula Wuneh. Every Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we will be bringing either discussions with various guests, including youth, diaspora all over the world, and also providing information or context in terms of what's going on in Tigray, northern region of Ethiopia, if you are not familiar. So today we are unfortunately 6 months, day 195, depending on where you are in the world, of genocide against the people of Tigray, again, northern region of Ethiopia, where rampant looting, rape, extrajudicial crimes, and far too many other war crimes occurring on the grounds, as reported by various news outlets all over the world, with credible information and victim and witness testimonies to support it as well. So today we'll continue on with our information in terms of providing context of what's actually going on this week, specifically articles produced all over the world, as well as providing other information for our English program, which we try to provide every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern, as I stated. So our first source, we're going to continue on as we did previously with a news outlet, which is very credible, the Reuters, which is a world-renowned news outlet, as I stated. So the headline of this one is Ethiopia revokes credentials of New York Times reporters. So unfortunately, the current state of Ethiopia is a fascist regime headed by an unelected dictator leader, cannot call him Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed. And the latest news from the ground, as I stated here, which kind of touches on, is Ethiopia has revoked the press credentials of a foreign journalist working for the New York Times. New York Times, credited outlet. In the article, this Irish national, Simon Marks, not a regional citizen of Ethiopia or a small news outlet. New York Times, as I stated, Simon Marks, the Irish national, which has nothing to do with the politics of the ground, has his credentials revoked for what reasons other than providing information and news and shedding light on what's going on in the ground of Tigray during this genocidal campaign. So when it states here in the article, he returns from Tigray region to Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, if you're not directly familiar, where he interviewed civilian war survivors. Civilian, key word in this article, civilian war survivors, not soldiers or people who are carrying out propaganda. Although some pro-government or pro-Abiy Ahmed members may say otherwise, this is a civilian interview. And essentially, the article just goes into depth on why Abiy Ahmed, a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, by the way, would try to silence independent press, media, by revoking their accreditation and being able to report news. Because essentially what's happening is the grounds in Tigray, the entire region, is facing a majority of the time, at least, a blackout from news, from electricity during certain times, from even access to basic news organizations such as Al Jazeera or Reuters or CNN, these kind of organizations. And the statement by his spokesperson essentially says, any attempts to directly link this to the prime minister is undermining national institutional processes. Bilan, which is his spokeswoman. That's an absolute joke. Everything comes back to the leader of the country who is responsible for such. But this is unfortunately nothing new for the 6 months that this campaign has ensued in Tigray. And this was produced on May 14th, 2021. So this is new news. This is not something that has occurred a long time ago, or a fabrication. This is credited news outlet Reuters, and then also the press member is a writer for New York Times, a journalist. So these are both organizations that are mostly just providing information and have no reason to be necessarily biased, unless you are trying to hide information and do not want people to see such. We'll continue on. So this website, All Africa, touches on Ethiopia's Aksum findings. So Aksum has been devastated during the 6 months campaign. Essentially, in the 6 months, there was early on in the campaign, before December, there was a lot of civilian massacres that occurred in the region. And it touches here on what the Ethiopia's Attorney General's office found in his, I guess, in his investigation, but doesn't seem like too much was actually uncovered. So he released essentially saying that young civilian men were armed and joined the Tigray militia to ambush air-trained troops on a hill in the region, but he doesn't really address the biggest war crime that occurred in the region. That had nothing to do with soldiers, that had nothing to do with the alleged group that they are looking for. It had to do with civilians. So as stated here, it says, what's most revealing is the widespread pillaging that occurred this week. As Ethiopian forces and Eritrean forces captured the town, there was a horrific massacre unfolded over 24 hours, an entire day, November 28th through November 29th. And it does not address that. It completely ignores that and completely skips that for a reason. Ethiopian government should explain its silence on this 24-hour period, they state, long after the clashes ended, when the Eritrean forces summarily executed scores of residents and shot civilians in their homes, killed others on the street, and summarily executed some men in custody. Most killed were men and boys, but people with disabilities, older people, and women, including a mother of 5, was also killed. War crimes. This is what we're talking about. There was evidence provided in the investigation done by several entities. I believe this one was Amnesty International at the time, and even Ethiopia Human Rights Watch was able to support a lot of the evidence that was found and a lot of witness testimony. But the Ethiopia's Attorney General, which reports directly to the fascist leader, Abiy Ahmed, running the country, seems to just skip over that portion of the investigation. And also this website has posted it as such because they have no reason to hide information and to push propaganda. This is witness testimony and crimes that have occurred against the people of Tigray during 6 months, but especially during, there have been scores of incidents like this in Aksum that have been absolutely devastating to the people. So we'll continue on. Another news outlet, CNN, fairly credible in most regions of the world, unless you are a few people who believe that propaganda is their agenda. So the UN confirms military forces blocking aid in Ethiopia's Tigray region following investigation. There's a video where CNN reports basically showing Eritrean troops, Eritrean troops, blocking critical aid in Tigray, not engaging in combat with their alleged enemy in the region, not conducting, a territorial investigation in terms of what's going on. They're blocking aid from people. It's simple. The United Nations confirmed that the military forces are in fact doing that in Tigray. And this specific video, you may have seen, Tiguara all over the world who are staying up to date with the news, may have seen the video. Basically, they're like blocking their faces. They're seen to be wearing old Ethiopian uniforms, trying to blend in as if they aren't. Because over the past 6 months, they have denied that they're even in Tigray. Then about a month ago, I believe, they decided to admit they'll leave the region, even though they never admitted they were actually in the region. So this is just another example of what's going on in Tigray. As we go into the article, for the sake of providing credible information, not just personal argument or propaganda, the UN's first statement confirming the obstruction of aid, Stephanie Dujarric, said that the blockades by military forces have severely impeded the ability for assistance to reach rural areas where the humanitarian crisis is worst. Of the 3 million people targeted to receive emergency shelter and non-food items, only 347,000 people, about 12%, have reached since May 3rd. 12%. With the start of the rainy season, our humanitarian colleagues warned that this is critical aid agencies can provide minimal dignified shelter for the displaced. And right here it shows you, there's another article in terms of showing what I just stated, the Eritrean troops disguised as Ethiopian military blocking critical aid in Tigray. Absolute travesty. At least 5.2 million people out of 5.7 million in Tigray are in need of emergency food assistance. As I stated, and the US estimates that only, well, not only, but 1.25 million people live in areas humanitarian workers cannot access at all due to these foreign forces, the Amhara regional forces, the Eritrean forces, and the federal Ethiopian forces impeding their access to the region. And unfortunately, this seems to be a situation that is not changing as time continues. We are 6 months in, as I stated previously, and unfortunately, as you look at this map, it shows you the hard-to-reach areas all over the region of Tigray, the northern region of Ethiopia, as I stated here. For those who wouldn't be familiar, you have Sudan here to the west, you have Eritrea here to the north, and then you have Ethiopia, Amhara region, essentially south of Tigray here. And Mekelle is the capital, seems to be the only accessible region, which is a travesty. And there are little pockets of where it seems to be they have a little bit of access, but as you can see here, the pink, the dark colored areas in this map are hard to reach, hard to access roads, or partially accessible, but mostly not in this region. And this is absolutely devastating for people who are facing, the Mbeta, which is locust infestation at an all-time high, at least in the past few decades, previous to this genocidal war, and then also, which the whole world has also been facing, the COVID pandemic all over the world as well. So, on April 21st, anyway, continues on after being thwarted repeatedly by Ethiopian and Eritrean troops. Note that, Ethiopian and Eritrean troops. A CNN team reporting with the permission of Ethiopian authorities, traveled from the regional capital, Mekelle, which we just saw on the map, was basically the only truly accessible region, part of the region, to Aksum, which is, we just touched on in the previous article, absolutely devastated by Eritrean troops. 2 weeks after it had been sealed off by the military, an aid convoy also made that 7-hour journey. Many aid agencies are still being barred from the city, where one of the few hospitals operating for miles is running out of essential supplies, including oxygen and blood. Humanitarian workers in the region are reporting this to CNN. What more proof do they need? Unfortunately, I cannot tell you what these people will continue to deny basic facts and information. Then it continues on in this article. They interviewed the father of a 7-year-old, Latabrahan from Chile, who has been treated for malnutrition. Like many other rural border towns, it's been blocked off from receiving aid. And since the conflicts began 6 months ago, being blocked off from aid for 6 months, you can only imagine the level of drought, famine that the people are facing currently. And the humanitarian workers themselves state here that famine could have already arrived there, but they would have no way of knowing since they have zero access. Again, truly devastating to read this. And this picture is showing U.S. aid being distributed to residents in the town of Hausen, which recently has been bombarded by Eritrean troops who hadn't received much needed aid for 2 months. 2 months. This is a travesty and a crime that the Ethiopian government is committing on their own people. Yes, a region of Ethiopia, but they seem to not care about distributing aid to their own people. Essentially, the rest of this article is talking about the nature of what Tiguara are facing in Tigray in terms of that the fighting erupted during the autumn harvest season, following the worst invasion of desert locusts, as I touched on already, in decades. And essentially, Eritrean troops, again, have been blocking and looting the aid in multiple parts of Tigray. And it continues on, essentially providing detail on such. But let's go outside of Tigray for the sake of, having other people, other Ethiopian experiences here. So another news outlet, NPR, which is associated to WHYY PBS, very accredited as well, has an opinion piece here about COVID, which I also stated is obviously many people all over the world are facing this unseen pandemic, but the people in Tigray themselves have to be at an unprecedented level of devastation from all these different things afflicting them, but also COVID. So this story is a woman. She is Ethiopian. She has family who lives in Addis Ababa, or very close to Addis Ababa at least. And she is living in the U.S. Her name is Maji. So she's from Michigan. She traveled to Ethiopia. It continues on, and it basically describes how she contracted COVID in Addis Ababa and learned how difficult it is for her to get, or for herself, but also for her father, who is elderly and has diabetes, as stated here, and how difficult it is for her to receive treatment in the region. So she says here she wanted to get a vaccine for her father, but since they've already had COVID and already started to show symptoms, she wanted to get tested, but it was essentially impossible to get tested at the government health facility in her hometown, Hawassa, specifically, which is not technically Addis Ababa, but it's close enough. A town about 181 miles away from the capital. So a visit to a private practices where she had to go. Most Ethiopians outside of Tigray, let's state, could not get a private, facility to get them tested because they cannot afford it, quite frankly. And her father is in his early 60s, as I stated, elderly, so he had pre-existing health conditions. She was nervous for the outcome that this could have on him. And she continues on basically stating how she used her education and networking, as I highlight here, to sidestep overcrowded health centers, and using a lot of her tools and her friends, essentially being able to get her into three different private clinics, it states here in the city, to be able to figure out what exactly was going on with her father, how to help him, what he was deficient in. But it underscores the fact, the reason I bring this up essentially is that the people in Ethiopia themselves are having problems dealing with COVID. Imagine in the war-torn, devastated region of Tigray, northern region, of this very same country, who is essentially fighting off Amhara regional forces, which is a part of Ethiopia, fighting off foreign forces, Eritrean forces specifically, fighting off the federal government forces, and drones, which are bombing highly populated civilian areas. What do you think the COVID scenario and situation is on the ground? It has to be at the zero level of vaccine, masks, PPE, precautions being taken, and it has to be at the zero level of being able to be tested or being able to be treated. As we stated in the previous article, there's low levels of oxygen and blood in hospitals, let alone being able to get a COVID test or being able to get masks and other essential needs that need to be met during a pandemic. And she wraps up this article basically saying how Africa as a whole is being devastated. Only 2% of the vaccines administered globally have gone to Africa. And the main reason I'm putting this at the forefront and bringing this up on our discussion is because it's very important to highlight all of Ethiopia is being devastated with this pandemic. So how are we to believe that the people of Tigray are not facing anything far worse? Because they are. And we'll continue on. So the Organization for World Peace, I think, sounds would be, mostly credible, would have, no reason to be biased again. And the reason I keep bringing that up is because that is what the other side, the pro-Abiy, pro-fascist people are continuing, pro-genocide, because that's what it is. Genocide apologists are saying, essentially, you're using biased sources. But these, I've shown you a vast array of different sources, different organizations that are reporting this information. So this, as I stated, Organization for World Peace, one more time just to cover it, discusses U.S. looking into the reports of atrocities in Ethiopia's Tigray region. U.S. State Department essentially has, expressed great concern, which, that's a term that I think all Tiguara are tired of hearing, expressed great concern. They've been expressing a lot of grave sentiment for a long time. But continue on. So they talk about, announced they're looking into the reports concerning the war crimes and human rights abuses occurring in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Just to follow up, this is May 11th, 2021. This is updated. This is not something that's old news again. So the crisis, as this often creates many other crises, essentially what they're saying is in terms of the Horn of Africa, how this can be a ripple effect on the entire region. But it kind of gives a backdrop in terms of how Ethiopia and Eritrea went to war in 1998 in the beginning of this, and how the shaky resolution basically led up to the 2018 pact between Abiy Ahmed, fascist, and Isaias Afwerki, warlord, president of Eritrea, is what they call him. So continues on, and it kind of touches on how many civilians have been the main targets of this conflict, which I stated, and is the most devastating part of what's going on. Researchers at the University of Ghent found that Eritrean and Ethiopian forces have retaliated against Tigray citizens anytime either party loses a battle. Let me read that again. Researchers at the University of Ghent have found that Eritrean and Ethiopian forces, federal forces and foreign forces in Tigray, have retaliated against Tigray citizens anytime either party loses a battle. Sorry. A U.S. aid report has claimed that rape is being used as a weapon of war, with the UN Deputy Aid Coordinator Wafa Said stating, "Women say they have been raped by armed actors. They also told stories of gang rape, raped in front of family members, and men being forced to rape their own family members under the threat of violence. Eritrean forces have been found to loot and pillage, destroying crops and hospitals in their wake. Ethiopian forces have been accused of ethnic cleansing against Tigray, with their being credibly sourced reports of multiple massacres occurring." We're reading, let's go back to the top. We're reading the Organization for World Peace. Find the bias in this. And they're detailing everything we're discussing over the past 6 months. Tigray are facing absolute, just war crimes are occurring in the region. That's what they're truly facing. It continues, it is the evidence of these extrajudicial killings that finally prompted the U.S. to get involved. U.S. Senate Department spokesperson Ned Price commented, "We strongly condemn the killings, the forced removals from Western Tigray, forced removals, the sexual assaults, the other human rights abuses that multiple organizations have reported." Again, multiple organizations. This is not coming from one Tigray news outlet. This is not coming from one U.S. or European outlet. This is coming from all over the world. People whose jobs are to report credible news. That's what they get paid for. This is unbelievable. And it continues on talking about how the United Nations, Ethiopian Human Rights Council have announced they'll be doing a joint investigation, which I think is an absolute travesty. The Ethiopian Human Rights Council does not have the means to be able to accurately investigate into this, and should allow the United Nations to do an independent, unimpeded investigation into all war crimes that are occurring by any party, whoever is conducting it, but it's pretty clear who is. And then, you know, the G7 group of nations, which is large countries, their foreign ministers, basically Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, England, and the US, released a joint statement calling for immediate withdrawal of Eritrean troops. And, you know, unfortunately, this is something that has been talked about for a very long time. Eritrea, led by Isaias Afwerki, has denied even being in the region. And before they even admitted, as I stated before, has stated they will be leaving the region. So let's continue on. So based off of what the US State Department released, May 15th, this came out from the desk of Secretary Anthony J. Blinken, who is Secretary of State. And I think technically his spokesperson put out the message, but essentially what they're saying is another statement we're tired of hearing, to be honest. The United States is gravely concerned by the increasing number of confirmed cases of military forces blocking humanitarian access to parts of Tigray region, most of Tigray specifically, and essentially talks about a lot of the things that we touched on. 5.2 million people in the region in immediate need of humanitarian assistance at even greater risk. It continues on talking about the governments of Eritrea and Ethiopia need to take steps to ensure their forces in Tigray cease and desist this reprehensible conduct, meaning stop all war crimes that are occurring on the ground. It tells them, again, we call on all parties to comply with obligations under international humanitarian law. International humanitarian law, this is not optional, including those relevant to the protection of civilians, and to cease immediate hostilities and allow relief to reach those suffering in greatest need of assistance. We've showed an article earlier from CNN, basically corroborating that right here. Eritrean forces blocking aid in Tigray, right? We continue on. There are many credible reports of armed forces in Tigray committing acts of violence against civilians, including gender-based violence and other human rights abuses and atrocities. We're recapping what we talked about earlier, basically. He's corroborating everything that we've talked about and that we read. And then he continues, the presence of Eritrean forces in Tigray further undermines Ethiopia's stability and national unity. We again call on the government of Eritrea to remove its forces from Tigray. Both Eritrean and Ethiopian authorities have repeatedly promised such a withdrawal, but we have seen no movement towards implementation. We have seen no movement, he states. We know this. On the ground in Tigray, CNN reported it. The many entities have reported it as well. Eritrea has zero plans to leave the grounds. They never admitted that they were in Tigray, and they refused to leave. And he continues on, we can equally urge the government of Ethiopia to withdraw Amhara regional forces from the Tigray region and ensure that effective control of Western Tigray is returned to the transitional government of Tigray. Prime Minister Abiy, he's not a prime minister, he is a dictator, he is a fascist leader of Ethiopia. And President Isaias warlord Afwerki must hold all those responsible for atrocities accountable. Again, all of that corroborates what we've talked about. But the problem that we have is the denial, the constant refusal to accept facts. And a perfect example of this is an article in Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is an entity, a news outlet many people are familiar with, and a professor, a lecturer of political science, believe it or not, for Georgia Gwinnett College in Georgia, the United States, a democratic country. Yohannes Gedamu is his name. Has posted an opinion article essentially on what Ethiopia needs is less, not more ethno-nationalism. And essentially, he has posted an article talking about TPLF being responsible for this war and genocide that's occurring essentially. And that he is supporting Abiy's government and its allies. So let's look into what he's talking about here. What started the conflict he talks about? Before we even get to the article, if you actually look at the picture that's here, this is Amhara Special Forces. They're on a truck in Alamata, Ethiopia, on December 11th, 2020, which is in Tigray. Look what they're sitting on. Looks like they're sitting on looted furniture, civilian furniture. But I can't use credible sources again. I cannot verify that, but you look at the picture and you tell me what you see. What a way to start an article. So he continues on talking about, essentially, November 29th, Abiy Ahmed announced the campaign was finished, basically, in Tigray. Again, we are in May, so this is 5-6 months later. But he talks about the conflict started early November when TPLF launched sudden coordinated attacks on northern command centers of Ethiopian National Defense Force across Tigray. He continues, in response, federal government immediately declared national emergency and launched extensive counter-offensive with the help of militia and police forces from neighboring regions of Afar and Amhara. The ENDF swiftly pushed back TPLF forces and gained control of Tigray and its capital city, Mekelle, in a matter of weeks. Nowhere in here does he state that for this conflict between the federal government and Tigray regional government, which he should say, not just TPLF, have had conflict and have not been able to get on the same accord for years. He hasn't talked about the blocked off roads into Tigray from the other regions in Ethiopia. He hasn't talked about the verified reports that they were already planning for insurgency into Tigray. They were already planning for something before this stated so-called beginning of the conflict. And he continues on, he talks about how TPLF refuses to accept defeat, vowed to continue fighting, right? And so he continues on here and he talks about the ongoing conflict has had a heavy human cost. I can agree. Forces loyal to TPLF as well as ENDF and its regional allies have been accused of causing unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Obviously, civilians have been killed and many forced to flee their homes and seek shelter in neighboring regions and countries. He continues, talks about there's hundreds of cases of sexual violence, which we talked about earlier, and also that citizens in Tigray are struggling to access clean water and food, according to United Nations. This is a fact. He's verified it with United Nations reports. But he continues on, the TPLF's guerrilla fighters have attacked aid convoys and road infrastructures, which worsen the humanitarian region. He's stating TPLF guerrilla fighters in Tigray defending their region have attacked aid convoys and road infrastructures, meaning they're the ones looting the aid that's supposed to be distributed in Tigray. Where is the source? Where is this information coming from? We just showed information that Eritrea is responsible for this, that federal forces are blocking off roads as well. We just talked about this. Where is his fact coming from here? He continues on, while the conflict has had a devastating impact on all Ethiopians, many believe the military counteroffensives conducted by the federal government with the help of forces from neighboring regions were justified. Who is many? Many believe the military counteroffensive conducted by the government are justified? Ask the people of Tigray on the ground facing looting, rape, constant bombing, bombardments, if they think this is justified on their region where they live. They're Ethiopian citizens, correct? And he also states that there's help of forces from neighboring regions, but he does not implicate Eritrea. Again, why? This has been documented all over the ground. We just read a statement from the Secretary of State of the United States. Is he not as informed as you are, Professor Gadamo? Continue on. TPLF victory would have triggered an endless bloody civil war across Ethiopia. What is happening today? It sounds exactly what's happening. There's blood being spilled all over Ethiopia. He continues, which would have marked the beginning of the country's disintegration. I hate to tell you this, we have already reached that date. We have already reached that state. He continues on talking about more. His article is filled with TPLF. They can stop the TPLF's aggression in Tigray before it spilled over to other parts of the country. Essentially, he's claiming success. What is successful about what's happened? He talks about, despite some accusing the Amhara and Afar states of supporting federal effort to contain the TPLF solely due to ethnic animosity against the group, he's saying that the aggression was started by TPLF, as he stated earlier. And he's stating Ethiopian National Army, which is tasked with protecting all Ethiopians and not any specific ethnic group. These accusations are baseless. He stated that himself. Ethiopian National Army is tasked with protecting all Ethiopians, not some, all Ethiopians. Are they protecting the people of Tigray right now? That's what I ask you. I don't think so. They are implicated in these war crimes. They're implicated in blocking off roads from aid reaching most of the region, as well as Amhara militia, as well as Eritrean troops. So he stated this himself. He's stating two different opinions here. He continues on that essentially TPLF for decades has, discriminated and abused both of these regions and the people of Ethiopia, which if he provides sources and context and facts, okay, he can continue on with his opinion piece. But his statement that essentially many people are supporting this is just unfounded. Who is saying this? People who are in a democratic country, who have the pleasure of working for an institution like his college in the United States, are supporting this and think it's justified, but you are not on the ground in Tigray suffering with the people. This is a joke, travesty for somebody who is supposed to be educating young people to be spewing hatred like this. He hasn't stated anything about how the people on the ground should not face this. They are Ethiopian citizens too. He does not continue on. He continues on anyway, talking about the history of Ethiopia, history of Tigray, how they took over and overthrew the communist government of Mengistu Haile Mariam. He talks about how they created the multi-ethnic governing coalition. He's giving them credit for everything, essentially, of what's happened. And we've gotten to this point, and talks about the political manifesto here, basically stating TPLF's manifesto states Amhara is the #1 enemy of Tigray, Tigrayan people, and calling for controlling them, essentially. He continues on stating I don't want to get into every detail of this article, but he talks about under the rule of TPLF-led coalition, Amhara has faced abuse, not only in Tigray-controlled regions, but across the country. He talks about how Oromo region, which is jointly administrated by OLF, Oromo Liberation Front, and Oromo People's Democratic Organization, committed unspeakable acts of violence against Amharas. And he seems to just cast a backdrop of why we've gotten into this situation, but he has yet to truly address who is responsible for war crimes on the ground. And he wraps it up essentially talking about how Abiy has been working tirelessly to achieve national unity, to help Ethiopians leave the tensions and animosities created by TPLF behind. What national unity has been achieved in Tigray? I asked the people of Tigray to give him an answer, and I know what the answer will be: none. It's the point of bringing this up is because of what this professor is responsible for. As you can see on the screen here, his name is Johannes Garam. He is a lecturer for political science, Georgia Gwinnett College in Georgia. He's an educator of young minds. He also says he is a political commentator on political issues about the Horn of Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular. This is truly troubling that somebody who is supposed to be living in a democratic country, enjoying the benefits of such, is stating that he is a genocide apologist, and he's comfortable with you knowing. That's what he's telling you. This is May 10th when he produced this. This is not something where he does not have enough information. He's pushing an agenda. There's a reason. And the reason why? Well, coincidentally, there's another article he posted in about 2019, I believe, why Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party is good news for Ethiopia. The new party is a positive step towards ending ethnic strife. I think we found the answer on why he's produced this absolute joke of an opinion piece. He's supporting his claims. He's continuing on with his agenda of pushing fascist Abiy Ahmed unelected leader of Ethiopia, and to continue the genocide, the subjugation of the people of Tigray who are suffering on the ground every day, the poor, the people who live in the countryside, the people who are already sick, have pre-existing conditions, the people who have no choice, no say in politics. These are the people who are paying the price for people like him, who are continuing to push hatred and continue to push lies. He refuses to acknowledge what we've gone through today. When we talk about Anthony Blinken, somebody who's supposed to be well-informed, what the Organization for World Peace has talked about, what NPR and WHYY, PBS has posted, what CNN has posted, and what's going on the ground, what All Africa has posted on the findings by Human Rights Watch and by Amnesty International as what's going on in Tigray, and by what Reuters, another credible news outlet, has posted. All of these outlets, all of these credible witness testimonies and interviews and footage of the ground mean nothing, apparently. Professor Yohannes Igadamu is spewing lies and hate to continue on his agenda. This is absolute travesty. So I definitely think what needs to be done here is reach out to his college here, Georgia Wuneh College here on the screen. This is his president's phone number here, 678-407-5009. That's the phone number. I just want to give you guys an opportunity to see this in real time. And so you can take a screenshot, or you can post, you can check the post that we're going to have after this live is finished. But this is the contact information for the president of this school. She is a woman, Dr. Jan L. Joseph. And let's keep it professional, but this is a public servant, somebody who's supposed to be educating the youth, young minds, spewing hate, lies, has more knowledge, he's claiming, than the Secretary of State or Reuters or all these news organizations. And contact this woman, ask them one simple question. Are you a genocide apologist? Are you for employing employees and professors specifically to educate your students who pay to go to a public institution, pardon me? Are you supporting what he's stating on Al Jazeera, a national, international, in fact, news outlet that a lot of people see? He's posting and ignoring what's going on in Tigray, and in fact is pushing an agenda and a storyline, a propaganda that he wants you to read. So again, you should be able to see it on the screen. You should be able to see the email address as well, but I'll read the phone number again, 678-407-5009. Give them a call, give the president a call, ask her, are you a genocide apologist? Do you not believe credible sources? Do you allow your faculty members to spew hatred? Let's keep it professional, but let them know this is who they're employing. This is who is working for them. This is absolute travesty that somebody who's in charge of teaching young people can do such things. I'll keep it up on the screen for you one more second, and then I think that should be enough. Allowing the people of Tigray to suffer day in and day out, and to say nothing when people, professors, are sharing bad information, not using sources, our only motives are to push hatred and lies. We cannot stand back and stay silent. I think we've shown a lot of information today, about 45 minutes of sources and articles about what is going on to the people up to date. This is just this week in Tigray, what's happening this past month or so in terms of what they're documenting in their articles and in their sources. But this is a small portion of 6 months of absolute clear, you cannot describe it any other way than genocide. This is what's happening on the ground for the people of Tigray. I want to say thank you for joining us this week on our episode, where we're going to continue to discuss every Sunday whether we speak with young Tiguara working all over the world in terms of building networking so Tiguara can have stronger organizations and be able to do outreach and protests and these kind of things during a time like this where the people of Tigray need our voices, but also when we have to discuss information like today to give people English perspective of what's going on in Tigray. And when people are posting biased information like this, it is the people of Tigray's duty to speak up and to help. I thank you for watching again. I'm your host, Wuneh. This is hashtag Tigray show, and we'll continue to be here every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern again. Thank you.